All right. Hopefully that's loud enough. Everyone can hear. And if y'all need, the headphones are noise canceling in case the AC gets too loud. I know it's been kind of brutal in some of the meeting rooms to be able to hear. But thanks to the Climate Registry for hosting this event and this pavilion in general. It's great to have a U.S. presence here at the COP when we may be lacking that in official capacity. My name is Sam Sappenfield. I'm an undergraduate student at Virginia Tech's College of Natural Resources and the Department of Forest Resources and Environmental Conservation. And thanks to everyone who came out today. And if you're on Zoom, hopefully you can hear/see us. I think we got the Zoom link sorted and all that, so we're good to go. And we've got a wonderful set of speakers here today, with more to join us later. So, Kala, if you could kick us off with some intros.
Hello, my name is Kala Inman. I'm a senior in the Department of Geography at Virginia Tech, and I'm also studying water and social justice.
Hi, everyone. My name is Esther Oyedele. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Geosciences at Virginia Tech. It's nice to be here.
Hi everyone. I am Avekra Yarneni. I'm a senior in Sustainable Biomaterials at the Department of College of Natural Resources and Environmental Conservation.
There we go. Yeah, we've got a great list of questions today to explore how universities are contributing in meaningful ways to climate change education, outreach, and action. As students, this is forefront to us, and as members of universities, to see how we're really making impact and change. So about a week before the COP, I was talking to another student from a different university, and it was very clear that our conversation on climate change revealed to me that our perspectives were very different on climate change and its imperativeness specifically. And it made me realize that while at this COP, or maybe in other classes, it may feel like we're all on the same page about climate change. We know that climate change is one of the most complex issues and equally as divisive. So Esther, what role do you think universities can play to help foster open-mindedness in an environment of productive dialogue among students when it comes to climate change?
Thank you so much, Sam, for that great question. Before I continue answering the questions, I would like to set a reminder that we have this noise cancellation headphone on the chair, and it would be helpful if we can use that. With respect to that question, I will talk, given the perspective of Virginia Tech, and I would cite some examples that we can take away from my understanding of how Virginia Tech has been assisting students to kind of like foster their presence in relevance to climate impact and adaptations across the country. One way to support students would be to have programs or curriculums where students can get engaged in. One of my understanding is the study abroad program in the College of Natural Resources and Environment, the CNRE, that brings students to conferences such as this. And the study abroad program enhances students' participations, gives students the knowledge, classes that they can take to bring them here, to give them exposure to some of the discussions that is happening on climate change. Another example would be to have organizations where students can participate in. And it's a different thing for the university to have some of these organizations or even some of these platforms or some of this curriculum, but it takes most of the effort for the students themselves to participate in some of these outreach activities that is being organized by the university themselves. It's one thing to also encourage the students to be able to like see what other students are doing when they go to conferences such as COP that we are here, to encourage the students that this is important. We need to put ourselves out there, especially when we have the climate policy shift right now in the country. We can set this as example for other universities. We can set this as an example for student participations. Another example would be there are organizations or communities where university can create an avenue for students to get involved with the local community. Some of the local community interacts with the local government, and if we have students that are being organized by the universities to go talk to this local community or to participate in some of these local events, that would be one of the ways where universities can set a pace for their students to participate in some of these dialogues around climate change and climate policy. Thank you.
Yeah, so true. I mean, we just got back from an event about half an hour ago, hosted by some schools from Colorado, and it was just super great to be around other students and universities, and it was super helpful to meet all them and foster some cool ideas there. So, Kala, coming from a student and as one yourself, what are some key ways students who are early career researchers can get involved in projects relating to climate change or climate resilience?
Well, related to what you were saying about focusing on local opportunities, I think staying local is the best way to get your start. That's how I personally ended up in the climate space. So you could volunteer. There are a lot of nature and climate related opportunities pretty much everywhere, whether it be water or forests or even something as simple as picking up trash on the side of the road. It's a great way to meet people and gain the skills that you need to interact with climate at a higher level. You can also get involved with your local government, doing things like internships or even unpaid positions can help you get an in to the climate field. And also reach out to local offices, especially forestry in Virginia has a lot of opportunities. If you just reach out and ask, they would love to help you.
Yeah. Especially with Virginia Tech, I know they do a lot in the forestry department. They do a great job of outreach there. And speaking of Virginia Tech, we have a very big Virginia Tech presence on this panel. Go Hokies. So Ave, what can you tell us about Virginia Tech's climate action commitment and the steps they are taking to reach that goal, or maybe the steps they're not taking?
Yeah, so first I want to go over the climate action commitment. Virginia Tech has its own climate action commitment, which was recently updated in 2020, and they have some very ambitious goals set there, from like getting net zero emissions to carbon neutral to zero waste, all by 2030, which I don't know if it's 100% achievable. But some of the things the campus has is we have an Office of Sustainability, and the office is essentially, it has a lot of student interns, and they do a lot of events and initiatives in terms of sustainability. So we have students who will come participate in panels or participate in helping improve the climate action commitment. And we have an annual sustainability report. We have events that happen every month, like a sustainable fashion show where everything was made entirely from thrifted clothing. And then there's green certifications. Different departments can get those certifications to make their department more sustainable, and even clubs. And that's just the Office of Sustainability. So we have other things like we have electric buses running to help reduce more use of cars for transportation. Virginia Tech Dining does to-go containers, which are disposable and also reusable containers. And then we have within CNRE itself so much research on climate action, from conserving gray foxes, which has been the most recent effort, to taking entirely compostable waste of fruits and making utensils out of it, to the packaging aspect of it, to environmental resource management, and of course some great classes that you can take to learn more about how you contribute to climate change and how you can help with climate change.
And sort of on theme with this year's COPs and the lack of submissions of NDCs, or the idea that many countries will not be able to reach their targets, do you think the Virginia Tech's climate action commitment is something that is just a goal, symbolic, or something that will be actionable and even reached?
To be honest, I think a part of it is definitely compliance, which I've seen be discussed in other meetings here. So I think a part of the climate action commitment is made to set all these ambitious goals for others to look at and claim how sustainable the university is and isn't. But I do know that places like the College of Natural Resources and Environment definitely cares about the contribution we are making to the environment and the changes that we can do to it with the research efforts that we're leading.
For sure. Again, Calla, this one might be a layup since we're here through Virginia Tech, which we are super grateful for this opportunity, this study abroad. And I've seen a plethora of other colleges here, some on study abroad programs, and they are just invaluable to get students engaged in processes like this at the COP. So super important, cannot be understated. But Calla, in your experience, what have been some of the most impactful learning experiences or courses you have taken that have shaped how you think about climate change?
Well, obviously, this conference is probably the #1 thing. I've learned so much while being here, and I'm very excited to take some of the things I've learned back to Virginia Tech. But Virginia Tech also has some more local opportunities and classes for students to get involved with real climate work. A lot of classes in the Natural Resources College will have field trips where students can visit different facilities and professionals around the area and learn about what a career in natural resources might look like and kind of get a day to experience some of the things that they get to do and some of the technology that's coming out. I actually went on one to the Water Treatment Center last year after there were some issues with water from a flood, and it was really interesting to talk to the people working there about how they made the decisions they did to cut off water and try to minimize damage as much as possible. The college also has several classes that are focused on policy and preparing students to tackle difficult conversations, usually with people of different opinions, and try to come to a conclusion that causes the least harm.
Yeah, that was not a fun few weeks without water in Blacksburg last year. Hopefully we make it this year, but I think we're through hurricane season for the most part. So, Ave, with Calla's response about how Virginia Tech has influenced her climate education, what areas of climate research or education do you think VT should strengthen to foster future climate leadership?
Yeah, so first I want to start by briefly defining something we learn in all my classes in the Department of Natural Resources is the concept of the triple bottom line, which is the people, planet, profit, or social, environmental, economic, for us to actually make a difference in what's happening with climate change. And to consider all aspects of it, you have to consider the social part of it, how it's impacting the environment, and how economically viable it can be. And so, you know, climate change affects everything and it's affected by everything. And you have to consider all aspects from renewable energy to stormwater management to electric cars. And I think that all these concepts that we're talking about should not just be something that's implemented for someone who's only interested in going into an environmental major, but something that should be implemented into general education as a whole. Like something I learned from sustainable biomaterials is life cycle analysis, and the fact that if you actually do a full life cycle analysis, you find out that plastic bags are more sustainable than paper bags are. But the regular consumer is not going to know that unless they learn some aspects of what life cycle analysis is, or maybe how they can do it. So I think these are important topics that need to be discussed in more than just the environmental major space and outside of it to general education.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we have some viewers online, but it definitely raises the question of, does outreach in the climate change field reach the populations that we need it to and the audiences that may not be involved in it as much? But would you like to see some sort of general education requirement or integration of climate change at Virginia Tech, and do you think that would work?
Yeah, I definitely think that we can implement something about just a little bit about triple bottom line. How do you define sustainability or regenerative or renewable and all the different impacts? Like, I'm not in the geography or meteorology department, so I barely know anything about it. But there's so much going on there, or so much going on with the aspect of water and the concept of use of water in the virtual space, or even like use of water and energy in AI. And there's like some basic ground level stuff that I think needs to be covered that could definitely be implemented into general education.
Yeah. I mean, curriculum kind of feels like the amount of events at a COP like this. You just can't hit it at all. And last one for Esther. With the context of this being talked about a lot as the action COP, and you have a heavy emphasis on the action agenda and a focus towards more implementation and impact rather than the negotiated agreements themselves. Excuse me. What advice would you give to students or universities that want to not only focus on awareness or education, but move more towards impact and creating meaningful change?
Thank you, Sam, for that question. And I'll tie this to the last question you also asked Ave about universities, outreach, and community involvement. And following the other session that we just listened to that was organized by the Colorado College, one thing I like to emphasize is outreach and getting connected with the community. One way students can get involved with this that we can even do within the university itself, and like I said earlier on, is having a community that can empower students to go out there to connect with the community. There are different levels of government that we can connect to, ranging from the local, the state, and the federal. And having students go out themselves, not just being restricted to classrooms or just teaching them through some of the courses that we do in our universities about government policy or science policy, or even having mock interview or mock negotiations alone is not enough. But if we can get an opportunity or a platform to send out students to go to Capitol Hill or to even go to legislative offices to voice out their concerns or to say what actually matters to them, it's one way universities or students can get involved with the policymakers in their community. I was speaking yesterday at one of the American Geophysical Union's events at the Oceans Pavilion, and a question came up about how can students get involved. And I say it all starts by developing the interest yourself. When you develop the interest and you find that this is a topic that is important to you, reach out to people. You cannot do this alone. You cannot advocate alone. There are communities, there are professional organizations who are doing this already. Plug into some of these professional organizations, ask questions. In universities, there are programs like we've talked about at Virginia Tech, several courses that students can take to have knowledge about how they can do these things. And another of the courses will be to get some skills, especially on science communication. Because it's one thing to have the zeal to want to speak about a topic. It's another thing to know about how to speak about the topic. And getting these right skills would help students generally in any universities to be able to understand how to pass their message across to the decision makers, across to the policy makers, using the terms that they understand. One of the things I've taken away from this conference as a whole is not just talking about climate change itself, or not just talking about climate resilience or climate adaptation, but talking about what is important to the policymakers. What is important to people we want to deliver the message to. Now, tying our message to what is important to them or what is the priority for their constituency, we can get what we want at the end. And that is one advice I would give out there to the universities as well as the students in the universities. Thank you.
Nice. Well, I think our next speakers will have some good ideas on this as well. So yeah, we'll give the floor to them.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Is this better? Okay. for the first half of the session. For this second half of the session, outside Virginia Tech, we have contacted some professional organizations as well as some universities to share their own perspective about this topic about bridging science and policy, and we would like to hear from them. Joining us today, we have 2 speakers in person, and we also have some students from Virginia Tech as well as one of our speakers joining us on Zoom. So we may not see, okay, we have Christine right there on Zoom. We may not see the audience from the Virginia Tech community joining us. And I'm just going to read out a short bio about our speaker. Going first, I have Dr. Laura Schmidt-Olabisi. She holds an appointment as the professor in the Department of Community Sustainability and Environmental Science and Policy Program at Michigan State University. She's an ecologist and a participatory modeler, working directly with communities on the ground creating change in complex systems. Laura's published research includes over 60 articles and co-edited book on the practice of participatory modeling and community engaged work on food systems and climate resilience agricultural practices. She holds an SCB from Brown University and a doctoral degree from the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Esther. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Next, I'd like to introduce Mark. Mark Shimomoto is the Vice President of the Global Outreach and Partnership at the American Geophysical Union. In this capacity, Mark oversees the strategic growth and combination of programs, partnerships, and initiatives to serve AGU's global community of over 500,000 Earth and space scientists. Mark also developed AGU GeoHealth program and oversee its integration across organizations to build stronger bridges between Earth and space sciences and public health. Previously, Mark was a health program lead at the U.S. Global Climate Change Research Program, where he coordinated the Federal Interagency Cross-Cutting Group on Climate Change and Human Health to address key gaps in understanding how global change affects human health. Mark also supported the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy in delivering health initiative of President Obama's Climate Action Plan, which included his role in coordinating and authoring the 2016 federal report on the impact of climate change on human health in the United States, a scientific assessment. Mark earned a Master of Public Health in Environmental Health Science and Policy from the Milken Institute School of Public Health at the George Washington University, and a BA in Socioecology from the University of California, Irvine. Hello, Mike.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And our online invited speaker, Christine Shield, which we can see on the screen. Christine Shield is a scientist at the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research, which we know as UCAR in the United States, with expertise in applying Earth system models to Earth's past, present, and future climate. Christine focuses on Earth's hydrological cycle in the context of climate change, with particular emphasis on atmospheric rivers, monsoons, cyclones, and extreme events, which sit at the intersection between weather and climate. She studies how weather system connects regions around the globe, including polar climate. And she is a proponent of interdisciplinary and collaborative science. Hi, Christine, can you hear us?
Yes.
Can you speak so we are sure you can hear us and we can hear your voice?
Yes, I can see you and hear you. I hope you can see and hear me as well.
All right. Christine is joining us from the state of Colorado in the U.S., so she's about 4 hours behind Brazil local time. So thank you, Christine, for making out the time to join us today. I will direct my first question to Dr. Laura Schmidt-Olabisi. My understanding from your work is that you've spent years advancing community-engaged research, and from your experience, what can you share with our audience in person and online today about what makes university community partnership most effective in addressing climate adaptation challenges?
Sure, that's a great question. Thanks, Esther, and thanks everyone for being here. Before I answer that, I just want to take a moment, because I've been kind of emotional this week, sitting on the edge of one of, if not the most important ecosystem for the global health and safety of the planet. And I just want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to the indigenous peoples of the Amazon for safeguarding that ecosystem for all of us and for the benefit of all of us, and some of whom are here at this conference. So, but to answer your question, I think universities and university community partnerships in particular have an absolutely vital role to play in climate resilience and adaptation. And part of the reason I say that is that there's kind of a fundamental conundrum of adaptation, right? Which is that all adaptation has to be local. It really has to be locally contextualized. And yet we need scaled up, widespread climate adaptation. And universities are ideal partners because they sit in communities, they have relevant research, they have relevant knowledge, and often they have kind of boundary organizations. So what I mean by that is parts of the university that can interface with community that sit within it, that can help build those partnerships. So for example, Michigan State University is a land-grant university in the United States. That means that we hold an extension service. We have extension staff in every county of the state of Michigan. Every state in the US has a land-grant university. And so we have direct ties to those communities, and there are other parts of our university that do as well. And we have the opportunity to do really relevant community-engaged adaptation research. And to solve problems that communities have and that are scientifically relevant also, and to kind of combine those. And I want to just point out that community-engaged research is a little bit different than outreach, where outreach is, and both are important, but outreach is kind of explaining and taking information from the university out to communities who can use it. A lot of the work that I do is really co-produced research between communities and university-based researchers, where we think about the problem together, we think about how we want to approach it together, and we work together in every step of the research. And I think that's also vitally important in order to translate research into real-world solutions to problems that communities are facing.
Thank you for sharing, Laura. That's really important. I like the way you kind of like address what community outreach is with respect to like community partnership with universities. And I will turn over to Christine online. You study the intersection of weather and climate, particularly extremes. What recent trends or emerging insights do you think states and communities should be paying attention to, especially in this time?
Thanks, Esther. So I guess I'll just preface this. I'm a physical scientist, so I think a lot about physical, science and how that's happening with climate change. And as Esther mentioned when she was going over my bio, I focus a lot on precipitation extremes, extreme events, the intersection of weather and climate. And so in this space, there are two really significant things I want to talk about just in terms of the trends of things like storms, heat waves, and things like that. And so we need to look at this in two different ways. The first way is we're looking at the intensity. And the second way is looking at the movement of these events. And so let's just start with intensity. Let's just talk about precipitation extremes. In the picture behind me, this is a satellite picture of an atmospheric river making landfall in the western US. And there's actually a AR that's pounding California right now. And there's an enormous amount of water associated with these things. And in terms of precipitation extreme, the trend that's really robust is that as the climate warms, there's more water vapor that's available in the atmosphere for these systems to coalesce and then dump precipitation. And so, it's something that I think everyone understands as we move into the future. We'll expect more precipitation extreme, higher rainfall rates, more water, more floods, and then things like that. The second thing that I think that people don't necessarily think about is the movement. And so this is what I call like the dynamics. And the dynamic, what I mean by movement, is like where are these storms going to go? So if I use the example of an atmospheric river behind me, we know they're going to be wetter and produce more precipitation, but the motions of the atmosphere are going to also change with climate change. And this is not actually as well understood. And so will these storms move a little, trend, so the climatology will move to the north, so an area where you experience a lot of atmospheric rivers now may be actually drier in the future, or will it maybe tend to the south? And this is the case not just for atmospheric rivers, but things like tropical cyclones and precipitation extremes and just general weather patterns. How the patterns actually shift is not as well understood, and so this is very regionally dependent. And so for your particular region, it's going to be a different thing. I can't say across the board, oh, it's going to be wetter. It's going to depend on where you are in the world, and so that is less robust. So the amount of water, the intensity is robust. It's going to be like hotter extremes in terms of, heat waves, but but the where they're actually going to happen is something that we're still studying. Things like weather whiplash is another thing that is trending in the future, and that means, like, what is weather whiplash? It's like you have these alternating wet and dry periods, and so when you do have a massive flood, the groundwater or the soils are maybe drier from a drought, and so you have a lot of runoff and soil degradation, and so we're seeing an increase in these weather whiplash, and that sort of also is a big trend that I think folks should pay attention to. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Christine, for sharing. And I think I can relate to some of the extremes events that you spoke about, because for my research, I use satellite data to look at how groundwater is changing with a focus on the southwestern U.S. So when I saw that picture in the backdrop and what you're talking about, the western U.S., I can relate to some of this climate impact on the groundwater resources that we're having in the U.S. My next question will go to Mark. From American Geophysical Union's perspective, how do professional organizations help bridge the gap between science and societal impact?
Thank you, and that's a great question. And I also wanted to thank Virginia Tech for organizing this panel, and in particular the students who opened the panel. I think I easily could have just sat and listened to you all, because rightfully so are leading in this space, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, so AGU is a professional association. We've been around for over 100 years, helping to support Earth and space scientists around the world. We have 24 peer-reviewed journals. We have scientific conferences, and we have ways that we're amplifying all the activity. Earth and space scientists are leading the way all around the world. And I think when an association like that, with a span of, 500,000 members in 200 countries and regions, there is the question of what do those scientists need, and also an opportunity to look at where the future of science is heading. And I think that's a really important area of where science and society is at the forefront of what most associations think about, right? How to close that gap, how to help to support and engage a robust scientific community itself, while also meeting its mission of contributing that science to society. And so I wanted to highlight a few ways that AGU has really looked at its wealth of knowledge and really thought deeply of not just how our community can produce the best available knowledge in science, but how to make that science both findable, but also usable. How can it be leveraged? How can it help inform decisions? How can it help to improve communities? And in the opening, my background is more in environmental health science, right? So this transdisciplinary work of science is becoming incredibly more important, not just within Earth and space sciences, but beyond into other areas like health sciences, like ecology, like economies. And then also, how does that relate and engage non-scientist communities to help produce? So one area that I was quite proud of, in a couple years ago, AGU convened a meeting on climate and health early warning systems for Africa. We were able to convene 19 African nations to have a very thorough conversation to bridge the gap between not just the climate scientists, the meteorological scientists of Africa, but also the health practitioners, the policymakers, to really look at where the gaps are in understanding to provide relevant early warning systems for adverse health outcomes, and where are the areas in the system we can perhaps intervene to introduce some interventions to help reduce some of the burdens and impacts from health outcomes. So I think that's one, using a convening space, using a convening power to look at a very specific issue and think who needs to be at the table and how to respond adequately to advance the science, but also address those solutions. And another area that AGU has been working on for the past 10 years is this concept of community science, community participatory work. And through AGU's Thriving Earth Exchange over the last 10 years, they've been able to develop ways that scientists partner with local communities themselves. They go through an adaptation framework together. They start by listening rather than making recommendations, and have the community set the priorities, and then to earlier points made, how to then co-produce the scientific method to solve a very local priority. And those are just two ways AGU is, again, looking at where the strength of the scientific community is, where these incredible superpowers are, and provide mechanisms to bring them together, test different systems, and again, inform the public at large.
Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you for sharing with us the different programs that AGU has with respect to community, science, and society together. This will bring me to a follow-up question, but this will go to Laura. And I'm just curious, in your capacity or from your understanding or your perspective, how do you think scientists or universities can balance the scientific rigor with the need to co-create practical solutions that work for local communities?
Yeah, I don't think that those need to fundamentally be in conflict, and I think the answer again is co-design and co-production, right? So when I start a community engaged project, that's one of the conversations we have up front, is what do we each want to get out of this? Excuse me. Communities know that we have to publish, peer-reviewed papers, but they also want results from the work that they can take and use in their community, and you can do both, right? So for example, we had a 5-year project working with the city of Flint in Michigan, which infamously had a water crisis that exposed a lot of residents to lead, and we were working with local partners to improve the sustainability and the health outcomes of the food system there. And we ended up, producing scientific papers, but we also produced a report and a series of community dialogues that led into the development of the Flint and Genesee County basically food system plan. So they formed their agenda around the results of this project. So it had real community implications, and it had scientific implications. And I think the key there is for both partners to come together and respect one another and say, okay, how do we both get what we need to out of this project, right? One of the issues is that academia values some products and not others, right? Which is a problem, and one that I am personally working on pushing in academia because I don't think that that's right. I think you could argue that a rigorous report that you generate and present to the community and that is peer-reviewed by the community is just as scholarly as something you publish in a paper that, frankly, only a couple dozen people are going to read, right? But there are some members of academia who don't feel the same way I do, so we're working on that.
Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing. And it's interesting to know your perspective about having works that are produced by scientists being reviewed by the community itself. This is my first time hearing that, and I think it's something that has now caught my attention. And I think I would want to know more about that and how that would really work out. But it will also be something nice if the academic community can actually look into that. Because for me, I find that interesting, because if we're trying to do a research that actually impacts the community themselves, getting a voice from the community on the kind of research we do is as important as the work we do for them as well. So thank you, Laura, for sharing. Christine, my second question is to you. And that would be, where do you see the biggest science gaps that limit our ability to inform resilience planning. And the second part to this will be, how can academic and professional collaborations help to close those gaps?
Yeah, this is a great question. There are a lot of gaps, that we can do to improve our science that would then again, forward and to produce to improving how we interact with communities. But I would say if I had to pick one, it would probably be just a better observational network. So we have in the global north a great observations. We have instruments. We have dropsondes and balloons and all sort of stuff to gather really great information. But there are many places in the world where it's data scarce, and so there's not a lot of good observations. And so this, this unequal distribution of observations actually makes it really hard to really understand what's going on with the climate, because the climate is the whole globe, and we need to, like the Southern Ocean, it's just a vast ocean, and we have satellites that help us with some of this stuff, but there are many many things that we're not necessarily observing. And if our models are not, if the observations are lacking, the models that we use to simulate what the Earth is doing now will also be lacking. And so a lot of the issues that we have in terms of verification of models and being able to, is this model fit for purpose for this particular science question, really boils down to just not having great observations. And so how does this, what can we do as academics to improve this? Well, we put our attention into not only improving the observational networks, but also improving communication between our communities that actually can provide us things like non-traditional types of information. So, like farmers, for example, may have maybe an oral history, or they may have, data that they actually have, but it's not necessarily an instrumental record or something like that. And so, Mark, and I think both Laura sort of talked about co-producing things. And this is something that I think we don't do enough as academics. We don't actually reach out to the community and listen to them and what they actually need and what they need from us. And then maybe we can, help them. And then it's this development of this idea. So I guess I'll just stop there.
Thank you for sharing, Christine. Mark, my next question will be to you. What successful models or partnerships has AGU developed that bring universities, professionals, and communities together around climate resilience?
That's a great question. And I think there are so many great examples of how to actually implement those partnerships, how to collaborate. We've talked a lot about co-production. One I wanted to pull a little bit more focus on, since we are at COP, is science policy. How to bring the scientific community together, how to bring community voices together, but also policymakers. And I think at AGU, science policy is a core pillar of what the association does with our community, not just on behalf of the community, but actually grassroots actions with the community. And AGU has a program called Voices for Science, which I know you're an alumni of, and you're wearing a pin, and Christine is as well up there, that helps to bring scientists in, go through the process of not just core science communication, but science communication for decision makers. Listen to where their science interests are. Think about where they are located in their localities. Think about in the context of what their policymakers may prioritize or will resonate with them. And then actually go engage with policymakers. Get those skill sets and bring that voice to bear. And that is so important, I think, as decision makers, whether it's a local decision maker at a state level, federal, intergovernmental, they do care about what their constituents say. Many do care about science. Many might not understand the science, but it's important to bring that information to bear to have really robust science-informed decision making. That doesn't always work. The US right now is currently having some impacts in terms of how science and science funding is playing out, and the role here, even at the UNFCCC climate COP, But this year alone, with that cohort, with that focus of climate advocacy, or science advocacy, AGU was able to mobilize 500 scientists to the U.S. Capitol to defend scientific funding and the agencies in the U.S. To protect public health, to protect the environment, and to expand innovation. And through our Action Center, scientists sent over 7,000 emails to all congressional members from their districts and 800 calls to really support the scientific enterprise, safeguard federal science, and again, make sure that science is at the table as we're making some of these tricky decisions. And that is in partnership. The other additional point I would make really quickly too, and to Laura's point, is to thinking about the system, right? Where are those changes? And to answer the need, AGU partnered with about 5 other organizations 3 years ago to develop an open access journal called Community Science that is intended to exactly address the concern and gap Laura and others have expressed, where community co-production of knowledge is not necessarily valued in an academic system, while also maybe not bringing the information to the communities themselves is in the process. And so this open access journal is jointly edited by communities and scholars together to go through that process, to get the scholarly articles and research papers out, but then be open access and communicated in a way that the communities can bring and bear to help inform their decisions and local solutions. So again, ways to think big, but we only are as good as what we know, and when these issues rise and when their challenges are a threat, we work together with partners to help solve them.
Thank you so much, Mark, for sharing. It's really exciting to see all those different ways where AGU is building like partnerships even with other science organizations in the US to kind of like co-create, getting community involved in whatever publications that is going out with these organizations. I would like to open the floor for questions from the audience in person and on Zoom. If we have any questions, we have about 12 minutes to take more questions. If I don't hear questions from the audience, I can keep throwing questions to the panelists. Yes, please.
Hi,
please, audio this way. Yeah, it's better.
Is this better? Yeah. So I work in international development, and the general sentiment of walking around COP today and this whole week is, oh, we didn't even know that U.S. had any sort of existence here this year. We're kind of hiding in the back corner. And I feel really bad because that we got us into this mess. We created a lot of what climate change is today. We also were one of the creators of the United Nations, and now I feel that we have left people behind. And I believe that us people in this room from the United States need to double down to make sure that people know that we're still there, to make sure that we still care, that making sure that people know that we are one global community. What are your thoughts on how can us as a scientific community, academia, and me as a practitioner, how can we make sure that we're doubling down our efforts to make sure that we are still thinking about collaboration even in this time of the cuts of U.S. federal funding for international development? Thanks. I don't know who wants to answer that.
Yeah, I'll just pop in for a second, just like from the scientist perspective, a physical scientist perspective, is that I know it seems really sort of dire of all of this stuff that hits that we're having to the federal science, but as evidenced here, we have a really strong university, community that is really engaging and picking up the slack from where the federal scientists are being muzzled. So I feel like there's reason to hope, not necessarily to despair. I listened on a podcast once that talked about hope and determination, and that it may seem like there's not a lot of hope right now, at least for U.S. sometimes, but that's not really the case because we as a community are determined to forward the science and the communication and the adaptation and the technology and everything that goes forward with trying to help solve the crisis. So if we stay determined, I think we can move forward regardless of what the government does.
I can add briefly. I think, one of the superpowers of Earth and space science in particular is it really does take a global community to understand the system. Yes, effects may be very local, but to understand the climate system, the water system, the ocean system, the planetary systems, you have to collaborate across borders. AGU does not believes that Earth and space science, AGU does believe that Earth and space science is a borderless enterprise. We have to collaborate, and with our members all around the world, I think that's one concern, right? When you have a nation kind of really withdraw, can you still connect? Can you still engage? Will there still be action? Can they still pick up the phone? And I'd say overall that's still very much happening. And it's not just to continue to thrive on the science. What I'm seeing is folks are calling their colleagues and mentoring, giving them offers of support, giving them ideas, giving them ways to help to continue to move forward their science, continue to help support students they're training, to continue to help publish different pieces, because that's really what this enterprise stands for. And then in kind of the UN context, I'll give one really quick example. When it was uncertain if the US government was going to engage in the IPCC process for the next assessment report cycle, there were 10 US observing academic institutions to the IPCC that stood up because they also, as observers, had the power to nominate. And as a collective, were able to nominate over 300 US-based scientists to be considered into the IPCC process. And as the Bureau considered the full submissions around the world, we're able to appoint over 60 US citizens through that process to the IPCC to contribute in a global scientific assessment report. And had that not happened, wouldn't have existed and would have been truly missing one sector of the important intergovernmental report cycle. And so again, there are small examples, but there's big examples, and it's really through collaborations and the network that's quite important.
Yeah, and I'm gonna just throw on one quick statement. Oh yeah, I might not be on screen, but luckily for us, climate change can't be solved on one single global scale. So at the UNFCCC or these COPs, maybe the U.S. won't be able to provide their input in the negotiations and their guidance, but we still have opportunities like this pavilion and the amount of other universities that are here, organizations from the U.S. are still showing up to the COP and helping out in other ways. And especially we're seeing a lot of action on the local and state levels too. We've had, especially at this pavilion, a lot of events from California. We've had governors here from New Mexico, senators from Maine, so representatives. So you're seeing a lot of action still from the U.S., just not at that federal high level. So it's on one hand not optimal that we can't have those high-level negotiations influenced and aided by the U.S., but at the same time, we're still able to do things. And, I mean, really, that's all you can do. You can't just base yourself on what the federal government is doing. So how can we still have an impact? By showing up to stuff like this and getting out there locally and on the state level.
Thank you.
Yeah, I all well said. The only thing I'll add to that is that, I think in the U.S. right now we're also seeing a massive attack on universities, and kind of anti-academic rhetoric. And I think the way we counter that is exactly what we've been talking about. If people around the world see that we are working with them to solve problems they care about, they're going to speak up for us, right? They're going to see the value in that. If we just stay in our tower and disengage, we're going to feed into that narrative. So I think we got to get creative, we got to get collaborative, and we got to get nimble. And, maybe that's a good thing to come out of this. So.
Thank you all for sharing. Do we have any questions on Zoom? Okay. I have about 5 minutes left, and I would like to throw these questions open for all speakers, including those from Virginia Tech, myself inclusive. If you could share one key takeaway for our audience today who are present in person and online from your experience about universities and professional organizations, how can they work together to turn climate science into action? What would it be? And for the VT students, for you to keep thinking while the invited speakers. So for the invited speakers, I will repeat. If you could share one key takeaway about how universities and professional organizations can work together to turn climate science into action, what would it be? For the Virginia Tech students, if you have to summarize one key takeaway from your experience as a Virginia Tech student, something you've learned about turning climate ideas into action on campus, what would it be? Okay.
My number one takeaway is to work with other people. You are really going to be hard pressed to get anything done trying to do it by yourself. So talk to your professors, talk to your peers, join clubs, contact your local government. Any way that you can get involved with other people, there's probably someone else out there trying to do the same thing, and you're going to get it done easier together.
Thank you, Carla. Anyone from VT wants to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think research is a huge part of it, especially Virginia Tech is like known for its research, and CNRE gets a lot of research. So definitely getting involved in research and getting that hands-on experience or any sort of experiential learning. Like again, this study abroad is like a huge part of it. And we're going to try to get more CNRE students to see how this study abroad is, because I think it's a great opportunity for others to join in. And then any of the research we do, like I've done a few, and one of them was a 24-hour waste audit where we went on site and we actually sorted through the waste into like over 15 different categories. And that's the kind of stuff you won't get to do unless you like go into research. And you know, definitely, like Kara said, reach out to your professors about it.
Thank you. And over to the speakers.
Innovate for change, I think. I think an assumption that universities will always be this way, an association is always that way, a government is always going to do that is false. You know, with every kind of challenge comes an opportunity. And so innovate for thoughtful change of what you want to see.
Thank you, Mark, for sharing. Laura, do you have a key takeaway?
Yeah, I totally would echo that. I mean, I think, you know, there's a temptation to be very kind of defensive and fearful right now, but I think we need to be thinking about what are we building for the future, because this period is not going to last forever. And if we're building now, we can really have something positive to emerge from this. And so that's where I would put our energy.
Thank you, Laura. Christine?
Yeah, I'm just going to echo what everyone is saying, and I really like the innovation thing, because I think one of the things that's going to help us solve problems related to climate change is technology. And so this is something that, technology changes really fast. There's a lot of really cool new things. I mean, everyone's sort of talking about AI and machine learning, and there's some things that are good and some things that are not so good. But one of the things that we do as we innovate and move forward is trying to figure out how to take this technology and make it work for us. And this is where the scientific enterprise as well as technology development really needs to merge together, and then just continue that engagement with communities and what you need and how to develop that technology and then how to apply it to science. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Christine, for sharing. Well, that brings us to the hour right on time, to the end of our session. And I would like to use this opportunity to appreciate our invited speaker, Christine, Mark, and Dr. Laura. Thank you for making out the time to share your perspectives with us. And from the students from VT, myself inclusive, Sam, Ave, and Carla, thank you so much for helping to put this together and making this happen, where we can share our perspectives about what we're doing as universities and professional organizations to collaborate even in this challenging time. And one great appreciation to the TCR for providing us this space to use to be able to share this event with other participants that are attending COP. I want to say a big thank you to you and to our great audience, both those of you here in person and those joining on Zoom. Thank you for making out the time to join our event. We hope we can keep collaborating, connecting, and talking about what really matters to us as scientists, even in this challenging time. Thank you all for coming.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.